we should be able to start now. Thanks everybody for joining us at this time of the day. We have a very interesting session tonight with Lucy van der Tas. Lucy van der Tas is the head of the talent acquisition, at ESA. Lucy is originally from the UK. She will talk about her in a bit, but just a brief introduction. She has been for nearly 40 years working in the Human Resources Department of ESA, ETESTEC, the largest center of the European Space Agency, and that is based in the Netherlands. From 2010 to 2020, she was responsible for the recruitment and the career management of the largest engineering directorate at ESA. So she has a lot of experience, and she has been fantastic throughout her career. I had the honor to meet her when I started at ESTEC, almost 30 years ago myself. From October 2020, she has took the role of head of the talent acquisition, and she and her team promote ESA and as an employer to potential candidates from many different backgrounds, not only engineers and scientists, as she will tell us in a bit. So I leave the floor to Lucy, and after a presentation from Lucy, we will go into a question and answer session. So please feel free to write your questions in the Q&A section. Lucy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Luisella. I'm assuming that everybody can see my screen. Is that right? Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Yes, good. So we're good to get started. So it's a great pleasure to be here this evening with you all. I was very honored to receive the invitation to speak tonight. And I would like to share with you a little bit about myself and my experiences at ESA, but also aspects about how to come to work at ESA and some of the questions that I know that people are likely to have. So I wanted to start with just saying a few things about myself. As Luisella said, I come originally from the UK. I usually say this as one of the first points in my introduction because I have a Dutch surname, but that is my married name. So my English name is a very unusual one. You can see from the map that I come from Devon, which is a very beautiful part of the UK, and it's quite southerly. I originally qualified as a translator in French and German. I never actually practiced as a translator, although my first job was with the International Labour Office in Geneva. And I was there for a couple of years before coming to ESA. And I started at ESA in 1983 in the Human Resources Department, and I was based at the European Space Research and Technology Centre, which is the largest ESA centre in the Netherlands. A few years in, I decided I wanted to get some additional qualifications, and I studied psychology for 2 years at the University of Leiden. I did that part-time, but then I decided I wanted to do something else. So I got my master in human resources management in my early 40s through the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, which is the professional organization for HR specialists in the UK. And it was a 3 years of studies combined with a full-time job, and my son at the time was 5, so it was extremely challenging. So my jobs at ESA, so I started off actually in recruitment. I was a recruitment administrator and I helped candidates. We reimbursed their travel expenses, and I was dealing with a lot of nervous people and giving them, helping them reassure them. And then I moved into training. I grew into the role of head of training for the establishment in the Netherlands. I held that position for 15 years. And then, as Luisella said, I became an HR advisor for the Directorate of Technology, Engineering and Quality, which is our largest engineering directorate. And I would say about 60% of the work I did in that role was, in fact, recruitment. So interviewing. So I went from being on the other side of the table to actually getting behind and actually interviewing people. And of course, I have been interviewed myself for the course of these roles. And I became head of talent acquisition in October 2020, which is a relatively new position. This role, as it's called and in its constitution, did not exist at ESA before. And I work in close cooperation with my colleagues in recruitment who do the actual recruiting. I'm there to promote ESA as an employer, but I have other tasks as well. A couple of words about ESA. Unfortunately, I can't see you. If I was in a room with you all, I'd be asking you to put up your hands, but we'll have to do without that tonight. But I think it's important to talk about ESA as an employer because ESA is an intergovernmental organization. You can see from the flags across the bottom, we have 22 member states, 4 associate member states, and Canada as a cooperating state, which means we're not the European Union, although we have a very similar legal and constitutional framework, but we work very closely with the European Union. And we are unique in terms of space agencies, as we're the only truly multinational space agency consisting of more than one country and representing more than one country. And also in terms of the activities that we do are primarily for peaceful purposes. We have a very big budget. It's taxpayers' money, so we have a responsibility. There is a framework that and rules that we have to work to for the work that we do and for the spending of the budget. But 85% of that money goes back to our member states in terms of procurement contracts with industry, either for R&D or for project development, satellite development, launcher development. And then of course of the remaining 15%, this is to fund our facilities. We have a cutting edge test facility here in the Netherlands, and of course to support the work that we do and the people who are working for us. A quick word about the various establishments that we have at ESA. You can see the overview there, and you can see that we're represented throughout Europe. We have 2 centers in Germany. I think the main one is ESTEC. As I said, about 60% of the ESA workforce is based here in the Netherlands. And then of course our headquarters is based in Paris. And then you can see we are located over many other countries as well. I can't talk about jobs at ESA without talking about astronauts. Now, this is not the main focus of the presentation because we recruit an awful lot more than astronauts, but we've had a lot of press profile recently with the new selection. So first of all, looking at our current class, or the previous class now, perhaps I should say, Tim Peake is no longer an active ESA astronaut. He has decided to become an ESA ambassador instead. The most recent astronaut up in space is Matthias Maurer, who got back around June last year. You can see him in the insert. And then Andy Mogensen, who is second from the left on the back, is in training now to go up, and he will go up later this year. And then, of course, the new selection. So that was extremely exciting. We started, of course, with the vacancy notice being published in 2021. It was open for 6 weeks. And then they went into the selection process, which took another almost 18 months. And in November 2022, the new class was presented. And here you can see them being presented on the stage to our member states. And this is a picture taken of the 6 astronauts having completed their first week in basic training. But as I said, ESA is more than astronauts, and we are recruiting at the moment. And I'm sure you will have seen this image and other images, similar images, on LinkedIn and across our social media. So keep an eye open for the jobs. And I'm seeing the questions coming in. I will come back to these questions at the end. Again, I would normally have a hands up, show of hands for those of you who are early career professionals or more advanced in your career. Just touch on some of the programs that we have for the early career professionals. We have student internships for those still at university, the young graduate trainee program for when you have graduated, so 1 or 2 year contract. We have national trainee programs, then the research fellowship program for postdocs, and the junior professional program, which is a new program that has come on board. There are three main things that you need in order to apply for a job at ESA, three basic things. One is the nationality of one of our member states. This is crucial. We're funded by taxpayers' money, and this is a requirement from our member states. The second one is a master. Now, obviously, you don't need a master if you're still at university and you're applying for the internship program, but for all the others, and for our permanent positions, you need to have a master. And then the third requirement is English or French. English is the main working language, but there are certain jobs where French is also a requirement, or in fact, even more of a requirement than English. But I will come to that later. I also wanted to touch very briefly on the ESA Academy. This is a physical university type school. It's located in Belgium near Redoux, which is about 100 kilometers from the Luxembourg border. And they offer a wide range of training courses there for university students. And as you can see, they're fully sponsored, and they range from clean space to spacecraft communication, space weather. They are primarily targeting the engineering and scientific community, but there are other programs which target the full range of backgrounds, because they do find that in certain courses, for instance, the CubeSat Summer School last year, which ran for the first time in August and September for 4 weeks, they had people from other backgrounds, commercial backgrounds as well, and the cross-fertilization was extremely useful for all participants. Touching on the various disciplines where we are looking for people. So what you see here is, I suppose I could describe them as the classical satellite engineering disciplines. We will need them. We need them now. We will need them in the future. You can see new developments, new technologies coming within the domains, but we will still need these going forward. The scientific disciplines, this is the same as well. You find most of the scientific disciplines in the space science, Earth observational, human spaceflight areas, but applied mathematics is critical for orbit calculations, just to give one example. Now, I did see a comment passing by about non-engineering jobs, and I'd like to touch on those. They represent about 30% of the ESA population. And so that's quite a significant number, and it's all the usual business support areas. I represent human resources, but we need people in finance, in procurement, and in all the other areas that are mentioned there. So what are we looking for? I mentioned already the educational requirements, and in some cases we need people with a master. A passion for space. Well, I am speaking to people who are already interested in aerospace, but if you don't have a passion for space when you join ESA, you soon get one. I certainly didn't know about ESA 40 years ago, but I'm pretty passionate about it now. The relevant experience, which depends very much on the type of job that you're applying for. I saw a question going by about why GTs don't get hired after the program, and that's because most of the engineering jobs need a number of years of experience, 5 or 6 typically. And since 90% of our young graduates go into the engineering and scientific positions when they come on board, they need to fill a certain gap there with the experience that they need to get. And because of our big focus on industrial experience is very valuable, but that does not mean that young graduates are not recruited. They can apply for our positions, and they can and they are sometimes recruited directly out of the young graduate trainee scheme, but it depends very much on the requirements of the individual position. Professional curiosity and expertise. I personally believe, from my years in recruitment and also my years at ESA, that professional curiosity is an extremely important competence. It's what keeps you going, it keeps you learning, it keeps you, how can I say, it keeps your brain alive right up to the time that you leave, and beyond actually, because I think it's very important to continue learning, and I feel that I learn something new every day. I touched on the requirements for French and English, which are the official working languages for ESA. And some other positions will require specific language skills there as well. But we do offer a wide range of training courses and also language courses if you are recruited. And you can see here a number of things that we offer, and I'm going to touch on a moment on a couple of the projects which particularly inspire me, and you can find more information about all of these aspects on our website, Careers at ESA. So life at ESA, just touching on a couple of personal anecdotes. So what you see here is the entrance to ESTEC, the European Space Research and Technology Centre in the Netherlands. And you will see this at all the ESA sites. These are the flags of our member states. And each time we have a new member state, a new flagpole is set up and the flag is flown. But what I wanted, and here is an aerial view of ESTEC. And if you look, it's a shame I don't have a pointer here, but you'll look towards the left-hand top quadrant, you'll see a small ESA there. And there's a story behind that. And here it is a bit bigger. So what you're seeing actually are most of the people who work at ESTEC standing on the field with a white piece of paper above their heads. One of our colleagues had managed to arrange for a satellite flyover and to take a picture of us. And this was last June, and it was an ESA team day. So every single establishment across ESA, they all got together to do activities during that day. And the idea was to reconnect. We had all been working from home. We're starting to come back to work following the pandemic. And this was an initiative of our Director General to bring everybody together and to reconnect. And I think this idea of standing in the field, and I was at the bottom left-hand corner of the E, holding up my piece of paper. Unfortunately, it's too far above for you to see me, but I was there and it was a very special moment. Another one is the recent JUICE launch. This is special to me for a number of reasons. The scientific satellites are very inspiring. JUICE is now off to Jupiter and its icy moons. It was launched by Ariane 5. It is the second to last Ariane 5 launch. There is another one planned mid-June before Ariane 5 is retired. And Ariane 5 is known to be extremely accurate, and she put JUICE right where we wanted JUICE to be before JUICE started off on its long 9-year journey to Jupiter. And here you can see us all together in one of the conference rooms in the Netherlands watching the launch. I took this picture and you can see on the screen as Ariane 5 is launching. But another thing which I really liked with the special name JUICE, our communications department ran a competition in January for a mocktail, and a mocktail is a cocktail without alcohol. And we got the opportunity to try this mocktail after the launch. And you can see there on the right the recipe, and that is what the mocktail looked like. It had edible gold in it, which was really nice, and a very strong taste of cinnamon. So it's not quite my cup of tea, as we say in English, but it was still a very interesting experience and something a little bit unusual to mark one of the launches. So I wanted to take you through the ESA selection process. So you can see on the right, this is our website, jobs.esa.int. You go there to see the application, to see the vacancies, and you go there to apply, and you can also go there to set up an alert. So, as I said, the first step is to set up an alert or apply. We, as an intergovernmental organization, we work on the basis of open competition. So this is for procurement, but it's also for recruitment. So if you want to work for ESA, you need to apply for an open vacancy. I'm contacted constantly on LinkedIn by people saying, here's my CV, can you tell me if you have a job for me? And I have to tell them all, you need to go onto our website, you need to find an open vacancy and you need to apply for it. This is the only way to be recruited by ESA. So that kicks off the process. So the second step is a first pre-screening, and this is a review of what you have submitted online. So that you will get an application form to fill in, which asks for various data about you. You will have some questions that you have to answer about your nationalities, your qualifications, etc. And you will be asked to upload a CV and a motivation letter. And the first selection takes place on the basis of these documents. So it's very important that you strike the right note and that you make sure that you present yourself in the best way. So a CV needs to be structured. I saw a question about, do we ask for Europass CVs? There's no requirement by ESA for the structure of your CV. You can, of course, use Europass if you wish, but normally speaking, The astronaut selection was different. There it was a requirement, but normally speaking for our recruitments, we don't ask for a specific structure or layout. But I do recommend you to make sure it is well structured, that you include all the relevant information, and you think about the recruiting manager and the HR recruiter who are going to be going through the CVs and reviewing them. Make sure the information is there. But the CV should be a little bit more structured, more formal. The motivation letter, I see many candidates who say, I would like to apply for this vacancy. It's a missed opportunity. This is where you can highlight yourself, where you can talk a little bit about you, what is unique about you, why you are applying to ESA, what attracts you to the job. And also, I would say, be very careful. There are some things which the computer will not pick up, some typing mistakes that the computer will not pick up for you if you do your spell check. And one of them is the following. So I saw an application, the motivation letter is, Dear ESA, I'm highly motivated to work for you and I'd like to apply for this position. Then they explained why. It was about a page, and at the bottom, I'm looking forward to having an answer from you soon, and I'm looking forward to working at Airbus. And this is something that your spell check will not pick up for you. So you do have to make sure that if you are applying for several jobs, or you're in a period where you're looking to change jobs, that you do make sure that your motivation letter is fully tailored to the job and the organization you're applying to. So the third step in our selection process is a second pre-screening. This does not happen in all cases. It happens in most cases, and it can be a telephone or online discussion with one or more people. And we also use an asynchronous video interviewing tool called Cameo. And that is where you can sit down at a time of your choosing, and you are given some predetermined questions that you read, and then you give your answer on the screen. And it's called asynchronous because it means that you don't have to be online at the same time as the recruiters, and they can look at them at a certain point. We usually give people a week to complete this phase. Step 4 is the final panel interview, and that is usually 4 or 5 people. It depends on the positions. I'm talking here about the permanent positions. If it's a young graduate trainee or a research fellow position, then there may be fewer board members, as we call them, 2, maybe 3. But typically for a permanent position, you're looking at 4, and in some cases 5 members of the panel interview. And this is where the final selection decision will be made. And normally speaking, there are no further steps afterwards unless there is some questions that need to be clarified that came up during the interview and were not clarified during the interview. But typically, the final panel interview is the final step. It varies. It takes a week or 2 for us to get back to the candidates. The next step for the successful candidate is what we call basic screening, whereby we verify the diploma and we take up references. And that needs to be completed. Then the contract is sent. All our contracts are subject to a medical. That is because if you join ESA, you come into the ESA system. You do not belong to a national system. So you pay tax to ESA, you pay medical insurance to ESA, who in turn provides you with that coverage, and you pay pension to ESA. And then the final step is what we call the take-up duty, which is when the successful candidate actually joins ESA. I'm just going to grab a couple of questions now. So Artemis Westenberg, you ask if a computer is doing the first selection or it's done by a human. The very, very first selection is done on the basis of some pre-screening questions, for which if your answer, so if we say one of the questions is, do you have the nationality of one of the ESA member states, associate members, or participating member states? If your answer to that question is no, then you are automatically screened out. And there are 4 or 5 of these questions. You have the opportunity before the closing date. So our vacancies are open for 3 weeks. And if you have applied, say at the 2-week mark, and you will get an immediate automatic response from the system to say that you did not meet one of the requirements, you have the opportunity, if it was a mistake, to go back in and correct that. And I think that's important. So that was that. And then once the application has gone through these first steps, these automatic questions, then they are reviewed by a person. So, and there will be some other questions. I saw one about the medical. There are a number of tests that need to be done. I think blood tests, there's a medical questionnaire that needs to be completed, and all the information is sent to the ESA medical officer, who then decides whether or not somebody is fit to start working. So the ESA vacancy notices. So I showed you in the previous slide the website jobs.esa.int. If you open it up, this is where you come to. And I'm obviously have these screenshots from my computer and not from a mobile phone. I appreciate that on the mobile phone it looks slightly different, but I thought it would be good just to highlight the show more options, because at the moment you just have keyword and location, and that's not a lot to search for, especially if you look at our website when we have more than 100 vacancies open, and if 100 of them are young graduate trainee positions, it's sometimes quite good to be able to have more options. So if you click on the show more options, you can actually sort according to the establishment, so the location, and you can see a list there. You can sort the grade band, which is an A grade position, a B grade position, or within the grade bands, and I'll come back to that in a moment. You can check the directorate. If you are interested in Earth observation, then you might want to look at vacancies in the Directorate of Earth Observation Programs. And then the vacancy type will, and that's where it's very good to use this filter when we have the 100 plus young graduate trainee vacancies online, because then you can filter according to whether or not you want to see those or whether or not you want to see the other positions. So talking about specific vacancies, I wanted to walk you through our vacancies and things to look out for. So there is a standard structure. We're going to be changing the look and feel, so that there will be more information. There'll be 2 columns, but today we have a fairly classical structure. So it's basically text a bit like this, and I've taken one that is online right now. And you can see that the first part, which I've highlighted, is the title. So that's important. And the Senior Innovation Officer, which is what appears here, is what will appear at the top of the search when you are looking through the system. In fact, the information, the title, the job requisition ID, the closing date, publication, vacancy type, and date posted is what you will see there. And what you can see is the closing date, and it even gives the time. So our vacancy notices close at 1 minute to midnight. The vacancy type, permanent, it can be fixed term, it can be young graduate trainee, research fellow, intern, and then the date that it's been published. The next thing to look at is where is it located, which directorate, and you can see that this one is in the Directorate of Earth Observation Programs. Then we have some generic text about our commitment to being an equal opportunity employer. And then you can see the grade band. And this particular one is classified A2 to A4. And there is a hyperlink where you can click and you can see the salaries that are linked there. Now, these positions actually also include the A1 grade. So it covers 4 levels, A1, A2, A3, and A4. So A1 is for people with less than 4 years experience. A2 is up to 15 years of experience, and A3 is above that. And A4 tends to be only for managerial positions, at least at the time of recruitment. The next point, which is important, is the location, and you can see that this one is located in Italy. So I'm not going to go into the description and the duties here, because those are very specific and they are different to each different vacancy. But I wanted to just touch on the technical competencies and the behavioral competencies. The behavioral competencies, we have 6 standard behavioral competencies, and these are these apply to all jobs at ESA. And you can find more information about these on the website Careers at ESA, so that you can see what we mean by those competencies. The technical competencies are dependent upon the vacancy. And this is one of the points where you can already start to see the real requirements. Do I match the requirements of the position? The duties is another area, what I will actually be doing. Do I feel that I can do that? And the technical competencies are the how. But there's also additional information, education, and additional requirements, which are equally valid. And you will see in this particular case, we're looking for a master's degree, and a relevant PhD would be an asset. And then the additional requirements, this can also give some very interesting and useful pointers as to what they're looking for. And you can see here, although it says it's an asset, a research record in the AI field, it gives some pointers in the general direction where they want to go. But it is important to make a difference between requirements and the asset, because the asset is nice to have, it's not a requirement. And I see that Maria is asking if it's mandatory for candidates to have the citizenship of one of ESA's countries, or is it possible just to live there? It is mandatory to have the nationality. You have to be able to hand over a passport or an ID of one of our member states. And the reason for this is because we are an intergovernmental organization, and this is money coming from our member states. So, residency is not sufficient. It has to be the actual nationality. Shanti's asking why a bachelor degree and 10 years of experience is not enough for an applicable job. That is because we've set the bar as a minimum of a master. And prior to Bologna, which was 1998 when the Bologna Accords started, there were a lot of degrees across Europe and diplomas, which it was very difficult to see which one related to where. But we now have a clear framework where bachelor to master and then PhD, and obviously all the levels prior to that. And since the vast majority of our jobs absolutely do require a master, and in order to give people a fair chance, we've set the bar at the master level. So that is our requirement. I'd just like to, before coming into the questions, I'd just like to touch on a couple of keywords. This word cloud was put together speaking to a number of colleagues. We asked them, what do you see, which words would you use to describe ESA? And I would say for me, there are a number of things here. One of them is curiosity. I think I said earlier on that curiosity to me is one of the most important competencies there are, and there are a lot of curious people at ESA, and there's a lot of people there who are willing to share their knowledge. Passion is another one. You'll see the word there. I think it might even come up a couple of times. People are very passionate about what they do, how they contribute to Europe, and that is something that you really do find when you come to ESA. And right in the middle, you'll see next to each other hard work and pleasure. Yes, we work hard, but we also have the opportunity to have some pretty interesting times and to have some fun on the side. Watching the juice launch was exciting. It's hard to say whether that's work or pleasure. For me, it was both, but definitely a strong element of pleasure there. And then the hard work in order to get to where we get with all our projects today. So you can find more information, careers at ESA. All of the information I've given there is explained and more, and then jobs.esa.int to apply. So I'm now going to end the presentation and we'll start going through your questions.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Thank you. Very informative presentation from you. And I guess many people on the audience get excited by the possibility to apply to ESA. We have lots of questions. We have 50 questions on the Q&A chat. Some are, let's say, there are some similar questions. I would start picking up perhaps on, is there any age, let's say, limit? I saw these questions a few times in the Q&A.
No, there is no age limit. There is no age limit. You do need to bear in mind that at the moment, the retirement age at ESA is 63. So I think it's unlikely that we would recruit anybody age 63, because then they would have to retire more or less immediately. There are some possibilities for extension beyond that, but they have to be duly justified. But the standard age limit for retirement is 63. So I would say it's more from a logical perspective in terms of if I apply for this job, how long will it take me to get up to speed and to be able to start giving a contribution before I leave? But there is no age limit for applying at ESA.
Thank you, Lucy. Another question that I saw in a different format was about disabilities. And what probably the general question is, what qualifies as disability that would not allow someone to take a staff position in ESA?
Oh, that's a very good question. Well, I did explain that at the time that we make the offer, we also ask people to complete a medical. And I think I saw a question about the medical there. There are a number of reasons for this. One is, of course, to check whether or not somebody's fit and able to do their job. And I think that that would be the determining factor in all of this. And that is a decision which is made by our medical officer, looking at the person's medical profile, and the requirements of the job. So we have jobs which are being adapted for the people with sight disabilities, for instance. So there is software there to help people. And we have colleagues who have sight disabilities, and there are many others. I mean, this is just one tiny example, but there are many others. And there are disabilities which are not obvious, and disabilities which are more obvious. But I think the key thing is whether or not somebody can actually do the job. And one of the things I say to people is you can always ask this question at the time you apply. There is an email address given in the vacancy notices, so that if somebody needs assistance with applying, they should definitely contact that email address.
Thank you. Thank you for this explanation. There was also another general question regarding the different type of profile, but I think you answered. We are not looking just for scientists or engineer, but there is quite a wide palette of competencies that we are looking for. Another question, or a few questions, were related to the nationality. You also answered that. There was some, let's say, variation on the question regarding the double nationality. Maybe you want to address that. If someone has a double nationality, I mean, as long one of the two is one of our member states.
Thank you, Luisella. There's a number of questions to be answered with double nationalities. If you have the nationality of, one of them is the nationality of a member state and the other one is not a member state, you can still put both in there. What we do ask is for people to be able to provide a document supporting the fact that they have the nationality. So if you don't have a passport for a second nationality, you could ask why it would be useful to put the nationality in. Again, I think the key thing is the nationality of an ESA member state, but there is also another factor which I think could be very important to know about, and that's also stated in our vacancy notices, is that we are required to ensure diversity across the workforce from all our member states. And there are some countries where we get more applications from than others. And you can see this information. There's a link in the vacancy notice. You can go in there. And I would definitely say, if you have both your nationalities, or even three, I mean, I know people with 3 or even 4 nationalities of ESA member states, and you have the right to them and you can justify that with a passport, then they should all be mentioned.
Thank you for that. There were also some questions related to the process of hiring, or better, YGT becoming staff. And I think perhaps we can address that point.
I touched on it briefly during the presentation, but I think it's good indeed now to go into a little bit more depth. So the YGT program was conceived actually about 40 years ago. The main idea was for people to come to ESA for a first experience. So most people are here for a year, but quite often we give people the opportunity to stay on for 2. But young graduates it's a maximum of 2 years. And it's very useful in the longer term to have a number of different experiences to bring to the table. So, and as I said, we also value industrial experience. We're working very closely with the industrial partners across Europe, and therefore industrial experience is extremely useful. It's not a requirement, a mandatory requirement, but it's very useful. So I think the combination of that plus having experience of different realities is very enriching, and it's definitely an asset. Having said that, it doesn't mean that you can't apply, and it doesn't mean that we will not recruit people who come straight out of the young graduate trainee program. Right now, we are in the middle of what is called a retirement wave. So between 2020 and 2030, 44% of the ESA workforce will retire. And 2023, 2024, we're at the peak. So last year we recruited 262 people. That's the most we've ever recruited. So, and this year we expect it to be more. And we've been given some additional positions by our member states. So I would say now is the time really to be looking at the jobs. But don't forget that aerospace industry is much more than just ESA. And there are a lot of really interesting jobs across the aerospace industry as well. So yeah, we can look at it in the bigger context, and we can look at it in the more narrow context.
Yes, indeed. It's not just ESA, it's the whole aerospace sector that is experiencing this retirement wave, but also the space business is growing, and therefore we need more and more best mind to come and join us all across the industry. There are any other topic questions, maybe Xenia, that you have spotted in the Q&A that we would like to address immediately? We'll try to answer all the questions, and I was trying to sort of combine the topics to be addressed by Lucy.
I'm also looking through it. There was something in the beginning.
There were some questions, for instance, regarding whether we have profession for, more type of medical type of research, which I think we do have in astronauts. Other questions?
I see one, if I may.
Yep.
ESA vacancies are always very clear in listing requirements and expected competencies. We know that normally a woman tends not to apply if it doesn't fit at least 80 to 90% of this. How can we filter what is really necessary from the nice to have that can be acquired on the job? That is an excellent question, and one for which I'm afraid I don't have a simple answer. What tends to happen at ESA is when a hiring manager is preparing the vacancy notice, he or she put in all the requirements that they can think of. So that's why in a lot of cases, there are a lot of requirements. I would say is quite often the requirements are listed in order of priority. So that's already a guideline, but it isn't foolproof. So it's more, I think you need to look at the vacancy in its totality. You need to look at the combination of the duties. So what you will be asked to do if you get that job, together with the requirements, the competencies, the additional requirements, the education, and where you meet. And I would definitely say, don't set the bar at 80 to 90%. We shouldn't set it too low, because at the end of the day, we are looking for as close a match to the vacancy as possible. So I would say if you feel that you meet around 70%, then I would say give it a go. Put in, but you really need to make sure that you put into your application what is relevant, based on what you have read in the vacancy. So whereas you might just be looking at some quick pointers from the job title in terms of which vacancy am I going to go in deeper with, but when you start making the decision whether or not you're going to apply, then I would really say do an in-depth review of all the elements that you can see in there, and how close you feel the match is, and how quickly you think you could get up to speed on some of the others. It's unlikely that we will get candidates with 100% match. In fact, in my experience, that has never happened. One of the things in the selection process that we really are looking at is to see is how big are the gaps in the first case, and how quickly can somebody fill them. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Lucy. There was also a question regarding how many applications we receive for vacancy, which I think is a variable number, I assume.
It's a variable number. I mean, it can be 10 for one vacancy, it can be 350 for another.
Yes, indeed. And perhaps we can address a certain question regarding, I mean, ESA has many sites as you presented. So what is the mobility within ESA? How let's say, someone that joined ESA, what are the possibility to move from one side to the other, or from one job to the other?
I would say that there are several types of mobility at ESA. So there is the mobility that is directly driven by yourself, and you see an open vacancy, you apply for it. We have this basic principle of open competition for all our vacancies, and that also applies to the internal vacancies. Then there is the mobility which is already driven by the type of work that you do. I mean, if you are working as a propulsion engineer in one area, and which, if you're a propulsion engineer, you'd be typically based in the Netherlands, and you find yourself supporting the Launches Directorate, STS, Space Transportation Systems, more and more and more, you could then find a natural progression towards a position in France or in Italy, and also within the establishment. I think there are a couple of driving factors. One is the fact that if 60% of the population, our workforce, is based in one establishment, then 60% of the vacancies are going to be there. So that will drive the geographical mobility opportunities, but it doesn't mean they don't exist. And there's a lot of interdirectorate opportunities from program directorate to program directorate. And yeah, I think that probably covers that topic.
Thank you. I think we have covered many of the topics, at least addressed during the Q&A. There are also a lot of questions regarding like graduate, PhD, joining and becoming staff, and there is quite an interesting questions that perhaps we can touch, we can try to answer, which is what is the advantage or disadvantage of being a contractor in ESA to become a staff? I think the question was formulated slightly different, but this is what was asked by one of our participants.
Okay, so this is a very that's a very good question, because there's a lot of factors involved in this. So just to differentiate for people who might not know what a contractor means at ESA, is that we have the permanent workforce, the staff member workforce. So these are the people who are directly employed by ESA, and there are certain core competencies that are required to be done by people directly employed by ESA. But of course, we have a lot of work and we need support. So certain roles are outsourced, and that's where the contractor population comes in. And there are some overlaps in the type of work up to a certain level. So for instance, a contractor may not represent ESA formally, and there are others as well. Just one example. So one of the aspects of working as a contractor, one of the advantages of working for a contractor, is if you don't have one of the nationalities of the ESA member states, this is a possibility to work for ESA. It's also a good way of building up experience, coming on board, and getting to know people, getting to know the environment. So that's definitely an advantage. One of the things about ESA is that we have expatriation allowances and other things like that, and there is a limit to how long you have been resident in one country as to whether or not the expatriation allowance would apply. Because obviously, if we recruit somebody from another country to come and work for ESA, we pay the relocation and we give an expatriation allowance and other allowances during the first years at ESA. So The contractor companies do, in some cases, give similar rulings, but each or similar allowances, but each company is different. So you would need to see which applies in a specific case. So I could say there are some advantages. There's also some disadvantages in being a contractor.
Thank you, Lucy. There were also some questions regarding the skill or the competencies need at ESA in the future. So can we sort of, let's say, make a list with priorities of what are the main profiles and skills that we need?
Yes, I had 3 slides with the competencies. So the classical engineering disciplines will remain. Those in mechanical engineering, those in electrical engineering will remain. System engineering, telecommunications, all those others, software engineering as well. What I'm seeing is a more and more transversal role. So whereas in the past we would have people working on components, people now working on components across many different domains. What we're seeing, new competencies coming on board, particularly in the software engineering domain. So the quantum, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, these are aspects which are relatively new and which we foresee will grow. Another area is commercialization. This is a non-engineering discipline. It's with business analysis, promoting startups, helping startups. It's also something that is growing at the moment. And there are a number of areas where you can work in those domains at ESA. But from what I can see is the classical engineering, scientific, and business support competencies will be needed now and in the foreseeable future.
Sorry, I was muted. One of the last questions was if an engineer or scientist can apply for an HR position.
Yes,
I think so.
They can apply. That, I think, comes a little bit back to looking at the requirements, looking at the chances. If you are an engineer and scientist who has no background in HR and you apply for an HR position and we have candidates who are HR professionals with an X number of years of experience in the HR domain, then the selection will probably go towards those people.
Yes, indeed, absolutely. Then there are questions addressing the nationality in terms of geographical distribution of staff. We have a requirement, correct? Yes. Is it correct, Lucy?
Yes.
So,
yes, and this requirement is embedded in the convention. The convention is the constitution of ESA, if you like, and it is a document which is signed by each member state and ratified in their parliament. And it says that we are required to ensure a fair or an adequate, that's the word, adequate distribution of nationals of all our member states across the workforce. And it is true, some countries are more mobile than others. So we get a lot more applications from some countries than from others. So you will see in our vacancies, and it's written there very clearly in the bottom, that we give priority to first to internal candidates, because we publish most vacancies now internally and externally at the same time. So project manager positions and some of the more senior positions will attract a lot of interest from within the organization. And so we give priority first to internal candidates and then to nationals of our underrepresented member states. And the idea behind this is to ensure the diversity, because we know that diversity on whatever axis you take, whether it is gender, whether it is nationality, whether it is generation, so age, or whether it's any of the other axes, we were talking about disability earlier on, it very much is to the benefit of the organization. And so this particular type of diversity is enshrined, if you like, very much in our DNA and has been there since we we started in, I think it was 1973 or 1975 was when ESA was founded.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Thank you, Lucy. I think we have covered, we are coming to the end of the hour, and I think we have covered most of the point addressed in the question, in the Q&A chat. We will go through the question that you have sent and anyway address them. And as Lucy said, she's always available to, or trying to be available via LinkedIn to answer some of your points. I would like to thank Lucy very much. Has been really a great session today, very well attended, and clearly with a lot of interest given the number of questions that we have received. You can, the session was recorded, so you can see it on the WIA Europe YouTube channel. In case you missed some of the points that were addressed during this presentation. Any final word, Lucy, from you and concerning ESA and the great, let's say, recruitment process that is about to start?
I think a general thing, and people who've heard me speak before will probably have heard me say this, so I don't want to be boring, but it's something that I really believe in, and I really believe in people following their passion and following their heart. I get asked a lot by people wanting to become an astronaut, and we know that the chances of becoming an astronaut are very small. We had 23,000 applications last time, and we've ended up with 7, so 6 career astronauts and an astronaut with a disability. But I still believe that even if you don't reach your end goal, I think you have to have a goal like that. Even if you don't necessarily make it, there are a lot of things that you can do along the way which you can really enjoy and which bring added value to you and your life. So follow your heart, follow your passion. I think that applies for all aspects of life. So thank you all very much indeed. It's been a pleasure being with you tonight, and I have enjoyed it.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you again. And please keep your interest on the symposium. The symposium, this was just the first day of the symposium. We will meet Lucy again during this week. And there are other very interesting sessions starting from tomorrow lunchtime. Thank you and have a nice evening. Bye.
Thank you.